Great to be with you guys. It's my first time in Lynchburg. And hurricanes made it all the way up here. So I got to spend the day in the Charlotte airport. It was awesome, ish. So really glad to be with you. What a great way to spend a Saturday. 2 people have already asked me this morning if they were too old to come with us on an archaeological dig. So I think I'll address that for everyone. I prefer older volunteers. They're already accustomed to pain and suffering, so they tend to do very, very well on the excavation. I have a Virginia joke, and if I don't use it now, like, when will I ever use it? Okay, so hopefully this is acceptable to you. Saddam and Osama wake up, and they're outside the pearly gates, lying there. Saddam turns to Osama and says, "Osama, what are you doing here?" Osama said, "I don't know. Of course, all this is in Arabic, but Osama says, "I don't know. I just woke up and here I am." So Saddam goes over and knocks on the pearly gates, and St. Peter answers, because that's his job. He opens the pearly gates and looks out and says, "Saddam, Osama, what are you doing here?" They said, "We don't know. We just woke up and here we were." He said, "Well, if you'll just give me about 5 minutes, I'll be right back." So 5 minutes goes by. Sure enough, St. Peter comes back, opens the pearly gates. Out walks with him George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Robert E. Lee, James Madison, James Monroe. And they've got their boots on, and they just start kicking Saddam and Osama while they're down, just putting the boots to them. And Saddam turns to Osama and says, "Oh, Virginians." All right. So I want to talk to you today about our excavation at Shiloh, which we launched in 2017. Actually, the process began a couple of years before that, because these are long processes that you go through of establishing relationships and getting licensed and so forth. But we actually broke ground in 2017. And if you would have asked me at the beginning of the excavation, like in your wildest dreams, what would you hope to find at Shiloh? I would have said, well, the things mentioned in the Bible are the tabernacle, the gate. We know there was a sacrificial system there, and so we would very much be blessed if because our primary area of research interest is the period of the conquest and then the subsequent settlement period of the judges. That would just be awesome. And so we chose an area, and I want to talk to you about why we chose that and what we have found in our seasons of excavation since then. We're looking now at about 4 more seasons of excavation at Shiloh, and then, of course, it'll take us many years to finish the publications. So let's start with the biblical text. Exodus 31, we know quite a bit from Exodus 31 about the building of the tabernacle. And let's make no mistake, Shiloh matters because the tabernacle was there for over 3 centuries, and the Ark of the Covenant was there for over 3 centuries. God said, "I'm going to put my name there." Jeremiah 7:12, "Go now to Shiloh, where I first caused my name to dwell. See what I did there and make it known." And that's really what we intend to do. But we know from this passage that God chose Bezalel, he chose Aholiab because of their skills. I mean, just look at this job description here. How God describes these men, the skill that they had. I mean, ladies, if your husband could do all of those things, there would be nothing broken around your house. Everything would always be fixed. These were amazing people, and interestingly, they had probably acquired this skill set while still in slavery. They were training for reigning. So we know that God chose them. We know who built the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and we know what the dimensions were, at least more or less, if we truly understood what a cubit was. I mean, we typically say that a cubit might be from the tip of your pinky to the edge of your elbow, but of course that's different on every individual. But we know more or less what the dimensions of the tabernacle were. Most importantly, we know the ratios were 2-to-1 from the holy to the most holy space. So we know like 100 by 50 by 5, or looking in meters, 52.32 by 26.16 by 2.66. And this is more or less using the old Egyptian cubit. So this was on our radar as we began the excavation. Now, the sanctuary is actually a perfect illustration, because this is about what you have in our areas H and areas K at Shiloh, from the ceiling to the floor. Imagine as you go deeper, you're going through different levels, okay, what we would call strata. We have 9 of these levels at Shiloh. So the deeper you go, the older the material gets. And of course, it's not just like a layer cake, nice and smooth all the way across. You've got dips and things that are built in and all kinds of things happening. And what we want to do is track exactly what was happening in antiquity, sort of like draining the water in a bathtub. So we want to drain all the dirt, and whatever's left there, we want it to stay where it is. And along the way, we're taking soil samples and all kinds of scientific testing that we're doing, measurements and so forth, so that we can recreate the situation. So as we drain everything within this area, then we're able to get a view of what life was like in biblical times. Now, Joshua 18:1 is an important verse. Many of these sites that we go to, there is nowhere outside the Bible that mentions them, okay? So, for example, the city of Ai, which I'll talk about next, only the Bible mentions this. And so you may hear somebody say, well, biblical archaeologist William Deaver said biblical archaeology is dead. Well, I've got news for Dr. Deaver. It's doing quite well. It's alive and well. And if he were to show up to speak on a Saturday morning, I guarantee you there would not be this many people who would be there to hear about how archaeology or biblical archaeology is dead. No, it's quite thriving, as a matter of fact. And when we look at a verse like Joshua 18:1, it gives us critical information. So it says, the whole assembly of the Israelites gathered at Shiloh and set up the Mishkan, or the tent of meeting there. The country was brought under their control. It was also at the Tabernacle that Joshua gave the tribal allotments to the 7 tribes that had not yet received their inheritance. And you can see there's many other places where Shiloh is mentioned in the Bible. Probably most prominently, we think about the story of Hannah. You're looking at a picture here in June of 2016 of me driving the first stake for the excavation. Now, there's nothing on that northern slope, and that's where we're going to begin the excavations. Lane Rittmeyer and Susan Latimer are there with me, and so I walk up on that slope and I drive that first stake, not knowing that where I drive it is going to be the epicenter of all the things that we had hoped to find. And so you can say, well, wasn't that fortunate? Wasn't that lucky? Weren't, also maybe, randomly. But as the Bible says, the steps of the righteous are ordered by the Lord. We happen to believe that God's involved with the work that we're doing, and that He knew what was there, even though we didn't. These things catch us by surprise, but they don't catch God by surprise. Now, I should tell you that back in 2016, in Bible and Spade, I published an article on the possible locations of the Tabernacle at Shiloh, and I gave 4 erudite speculations, on the summit where that tower is in this photo, and then down on a northern platform over on the southern approach. And then I hypothesized that it could have even moved around at Shiloh. It was a mobile structure, and maybe the whole site was considered sacred. So it was not on my radar that we were going to uncover a building that matched the biblical descriptions of the tabernacle, that was perfectly east-west oriented, that had a sacrificial deposit associated with it near the ancient gate. I wish I could say that it was my scholarly aptitude that led us to that spot, but in reality, I was more surprised than anyone. Now, here's our chronology, which is always important to us. We have the tabernacle at Shiloh from about 1399 to 1075. The 1075 date comes to us from a sealed locus, which we believe is the Philistine destruction of Shiloh, about 1075. So, little over 3 centuries. The Mishnah, what we call the Seder Olam, says 369 years. So you have places where the Mishnaic or Talmudic literature contradicts the biblical account. And so in this instance, we'll go with the biblical date. We'll just say about or a little over 3 centuries, this was Israel's first capital. Now listen, folks, 3 centuries is a long time, okay? Think about American history. So when Jerusalem was still a pagan city, you came to Shiloh if you wanted to connect with God. And you came just like us. Hannah and Elkanah, People like them came just like us, broken, messed up. Sin fractures our relationship with God. It fractures our relationship with each other. And through the sacrificial system, we are able to renew those relationships. This is the Madaba map, maybe the most famous map in the world. It's a Byzantine period map. St. George's Church in Madaba, Jordan. I was there again recently. And archaeologists love to study this map. We've published a number of articles on it in Bible and Spade because some of these sites, due to urban sprawl, we no longer have access to, or wars or various things have destroyed different sites. So we can go back and look at an ancient map and get clues as to where things may have been. And you can see on the map that Shiloh is prominently marked, Shiloh, where the ark stayed. So again, the ark is what's most important because this represents the presence of God at Shiloh. This is what it looks like for us after, it says 5 seasons, it's actually 6 seasons of excavation. We can begin to see all these walls emerge. And if you like a good jigsaw puzzle, oh, you would love excavating with us, because imagine taking 100 different jigsaw puzzles with no pictures and mixing them all together and throwing them out and trying to put this together. That's what we're doing. And it's slow, meticulous, painstaking work. But eventually we are able, through foundation deposits, through foundation trenches, through ceramic typology, and that's the study of pottery, like these, just glancing from here, I hadn't seen this until I looked down, I can tell you immediately that those are first century handles from the time of Jesus, this pottery. That's because I'm a ceramic typologist, so the pottery changes in each time period, and so usually we can tell you the century, sometimes the decade, that a piece of pottery was made because of the typology. So being a ceramic typologist, or as my wife would say, boring. Like, who cares about this? Well, for us, it matters a lot because that's the primary means by which we're dating. So using all these various means, inscriptions, or what we would call glyptic things with inscriptions on them, pottery, various scientific tests, we are eventually able to date these walls and determine which one is from which time period. Now, interestingly, and this may hope everybody had some coffee. By now, your Advil's kicked in, your caffeine's kicked in, everybody's good, Holy Spirit's moving. Because it may come as news to you that there was a permanent structure, a temple structure built at Shiloh. So when we think tabernacle, we're thinking only a tent. So what remains would there be from that? We can't expect to find anything. The animal skins would have deteriorated long ago, even if the clasps and foundations would have survived. But actually, there's more to the story. 1 Samuel 3 begins to use, you'll pick it up in English clear enough, but in Hebrew it's even more clear. You are transitioning from temporary language into permanent language. First, you're talking about the tents of the tabernacle, then the walls of the tabernacle. Now you're talking about the Mishkan. Now you're talking about the temple of the Lord, a permanent sort of a structure. And then we have 2 Mishnaic passages, the Zevayim and the Seder Olam, that also tell us that a permanent structure was built at Shiloh. So let's look at these passages. 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 3. The lamp, or the menorah of God, had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down within the temple of the Lord. Now, that's the first time we see the word temple in the Bible. So when we talk about first temple period, second temple period, it's almost like when we know that 1 Corinthians was not Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, because in 1 Corinthians, he refers to his former letter. But we still say 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. So there's actually at least 4 Corinthian letters. So when we say first and second temple period, that's not exactly accurate, but really we have first temple period is really second temple period, and second temple period is really third temple period. It says that this was the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Verse 15, Samuel lay until the morning, then he opened the doors, delet in Hebrew, the doors of the house of the Lord. You no longer have temporary language. You have permanent language being used. Now, how they got permission from God to go from a tent to a permanent structure, that I don't know. But we do know that the text of the Bible itself is telling us that there was a permanent structure that was built at Shiloh. It's very interesting because at Shiloh, in the late Bronze Age, when the Israelites arrive around 1400, we know that there's people there because of the pottery, but we don't have any houses. There's no domestic dwellings. They are apparently still living in tents at this point at Shiloh, even though we know they're there. Once this building is built, all of a sudden now we start seeing domestic structures as well. That same idea that David had, like, how can I build a house for myself when God is living in a tent? So Yahweh is living in a tent. They continue to live in tents while they're at Shiloh apparently as well. Now here's what the Mishnah says in Zevayim 14:6. After the Israelites, came to Shiloh, God forbade the high places. There was no roof beam there, but below was a house of stone, and above were hangings, and this was the resting place. Then we have the Seder Olam. This is 2nd century. Shiloh's sanctuary had stone walls covered by tapestries. There you go. So we have the biblical text in 1 Samuel 3. We have 2 Mishneh passages. So 3 witnesses that tell us that a permanent structure was built at Shiloh. We knew that. That was on our radar. But I never dreamed that we were driving the first stake right where that building was. This is one artist's rendition. This is an old rendition, so I'm not telling you anything new. Scholars have always known from reading 1 Samuel 3 that it says that a permanent structure was there with a tent over it, but we just now have archaeological evidence. But you can conceptualize sort of what this may have looked like with a temple, but instead of having a roof, you have a tent over it. So it's a quasi-tabernacle tent, if you will. So what I want to run through in the next few minutes with you, and if somebody could do me a favor, Pastor Troy or somebody, just let me know when I have 5 minutes. Just give me a high five so I can land the ship on time. These are the things I want to talk about in the next few minutes. A monumental building, ceramic pomegranates, and now I might add faience pomegranates because we found another one just a couple of months ago, altar horns, murex shells, storage rooms, a favissa, which is a sacred deposit, the gate, and an approach road. So let's look at these one at a time. This is spanning our areas H and K. There's a path right through the middle, which is kind of nice in one way. So we have gone through early Islamic material. We've then gone through Byzantine period material, then late Roman, then early Roman, then Hellenistic, then Persian Iron Age 3, and then Iron Age 2, down into Iron Age 1, which is about around the year 1100 BC, and then into the late Bronze Age, 14 to 1200 BC, which is the period of Joshua, the first settlement there, and the period of the Judges. That's the tabernacle period at Shiloh, from about 1400 to about 1075. So we've gone through all these levels, and now these walls begin to emerge, and this is the blueprint that we begin to see. Very interesting, because that first wall that emerged, our wall 10, I knew that it was from that time period, and so I began to take note that it was perfectly east-west. At that point, that's all that I knew. Well, that's interesting. We have a large structure from that time period, one wall, it's east-west. We got a lot of work to do, a lot of digging to do. We'll see what emerges. Well, with each season, more of the building began to emerge, and we had perpendicular walls and parallel walls. So I asked the guys on our team, hey, give me the dimensions of the tabernacle, superimpose them on top of the walls that we've already excavated, taking a drone shot and then superimposing the graphics. Wow, that's a perfect fit. Well, now I was interested, but we didn't know enough at that point to say, hey, we have found the building of the tabernacle, but we began to track this, filling in portions of it each season. Well, once we knew these dimensions, I thought, wow, this is interesting. And in my next talk, I'm going to talk about Khirbet el-Maqader. We excavated a church at Khirbet el-Maqader on top of the hill, And it's a Byzantine period church, 4th century, very, very early Byzantine church. And I thought, wow, that rings a bell, those dimensions. So I went back to the publication on that, and I took the dimensions of the tabernacle. I superimposed them on the church that we had excavated, and look at what we've got. It's a perfect fit. It's a perfect fit. I didn't know that. I didn't know that early Christians were architecturally depicting themselves as the tabernacle of God. I mean, I guess it shouldn't have surprised me because both Paul and Peter use that language. We are the temple of God, the dwelling of God. But I didn't know that architecturally they were reflecting that reality on 2-to-1 ratios of holy space to most holy space. That's what's so great about what I get to do as an archaeologist. Every day I get to learn something new. And if we're not researching in the field, then we're researching in libraries and writing reports. But I get to learn new stuff constantly and help facilitate this. And I hope you, being here on a Saturday morning, suggests to me that you have this intellectual curiosity also, that you're lifetime learners and wanting to understand God's work of redemption in history. You know, we talk about special revelation, the Bible. We talk about general revelation as coming to us in creation. But I would suggest to you that we also have the material culture, and that archaeology, if we can learn its language, is also giving us a witness of God's redemptive work in history. Now, Jesus said in Luke 19:40, the stones were talking to him. I know the feeling, okay? It's not only stones, it's pottery and it's, flints. It's lots of things are talking to me. Lots of voices. And they're all telling me the same thing, a very consistent message that the Bible is a reliable historical source. That's very interesting because the person who excavated Shiloh before us, Israel Finkelstein on behalf of Bar-Ilan University in the 1980s, we're the third major excavation at Shiloh. They'd done 2 or 3% in the 1920s, 3 or 4% in the 1980s. So, we still knew very little about the site. What we wanted to do at ABR was to connect what the Danish had done, what the Israelis had done, open up a broader area so we weren't subject to misinterpretation. Well, Israel Finkelstein is the single leading voice of minimalism in the world today. Minimalism means the Bible is guilty until proven innocent. And he's the one who preceded us at Shiloh. And so when you hear over and over again from Israel Finkelstein and others that you can't trust the Bible, that the Bible is not a reliable historical source, the Israelites weren't there when the Bible says that they were, how many of you know what Proverbs 21 says? The first one to present his case sounds right until another comes along. And now another has come along. And so what we're finding is very different from what Dr. Finkelstein, actually we're finding the same thing, but our conclusions are very different, and now we get to engage in that arena of ideas. It's very interesting because when I'll say something in public or in the media or whatever, well, the media will immediately run to Finkelstein and say, well, Stripling said this, what do you say? And if he says something, they'll come and ask me. He's actually really nice on a personal level. We just presuppositionally disagree on almost everything. Got any friends like that? Now, here's what a typical cross-section looks like. Quite complicated. The deeper that you're going, the older the material is getting. Now, our primary area of research focus is the period of the conquest. But in order to get there, we go through all these super interesting, I'm extremely interested in the New Testament material. In fact, I've now become an expert in the pottery from that time period. So all these things are really, really interesting. And so we start publishing articles and writing books and learning all these things about these other time periods too. So we see a flow or a continuity until we get down to our primary focus. But this is from 2 years ago, these 3 silver coins from a single square from a locust, which I've now published a peer-reviewed article on these in the Jerusalem Journal of Archaeology from Hebrew University. And this tells us more about the Bar Kokhba revolt and the first Jewish revolt. So very, very interesting. First and second century revolts that took place. So we documenting very carefully, training our team as we're going down so that our protocols are getting honed each day, each week, each month, each season. Our excellence is growing. Our protocols are improving so that, we talk about doctors practice medicine, lawyers practice law. I mean, we're not perfect either. So we're trying to constantly assess and hone and improve, because as archaeologists, we get one bite at the apple. In the process of excavating, I am destroying the evidence and I'm making it inaccessible to others. And you can never go back and repeat that experiment again. I can't get it back in sequence. And so it behooves us. We have a responsibility to history. We have a responsibility to God to do this correctly and with excellence the first time, so that we can accurately say what took place there. For example, the technology that we have perfected, I wouldn't say created, but we have perfected wet sifting, where we wash every matrix before we discard it. It has increased our finds by 75%. And what I did is I went back to old dump piles. When I talk about Mount Ebal this afternoon, you'll hear about this. I went back to old dump piles from the 1980s and I processed them with our new technology. And I found far more in the dump pile than the archaeologists published in their reports. That doesn't mean they're bad archaeologists. That just means the methodology is that we've been throwing away 75% of the evidence in the past. So when someone like Finkelstein says, well, we excavated Megiddo, and we didn't find evidence of this or that. Well, I guess not, when we're throwing away 75% of the evidence. And so we are now able to recover everything, and we're training other universities, other teams on how to use this same methodology. It's quite exciting. This is that wall 10 I was referring to. Can you see the size of that wall? That's 3 meters of height that has survived. When we begin to uncover this monumental building, I thought, well, we'll have the foundations of it. No, we've got between 2 and in some places 3 meters. That's 3 meters. Thinking of meters, not in feet. What's that, 12 feet or something like this? So you've got a massive wall that's about 1.2 meters wide and then 3 meters high. Wow, I never expected to have this much preservation of this building. Now let's talk about ceramic pomegranates. 7 sacred fruits when the Israelites entered the land. God said you're going to have dates and figs and grapes and so forth. But only the pomegranate goes into the presence of the Lord, into the very holy of holies. On the hem of the priest's garments, you have bells and pomegranates. And in Solomon's temple, you have over 200 pomegranates, ceramic pomegranates, that adorn Solomon's temple later. So what is it about the pomegranate that represents the presence of God? Well, we could go on and on about this, but there is one species of pomegranate that has only 613 seeds. Every pomegranate has 613 seeds within that species. And I know this because I've counted them. It took me years, but I've counted them. Some of you may be old enough to remember how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. So like, how many seeds are there actually in a pomegranate? I think it has to do with fecundity, or fecundity means like the potential for reproduction, for fertility. All ancient religions were fertility-based religions. That includes Yahwehism. If you couldn't reproduce your crops, your wives, you didn't survive. And so it is about reproduction. Or if I could put it this way, you can count the number of seeds in a pomegranate, but you can't count the number of pomegranates in a seed. You see, it's about this ability of quantum growth, of explosive blessing from God. And so these pomegranates, as we begin to find them, are the motif of the tabernacle, and we find them within this building. And here's what the first one looked like. You see the little hook on the top. So I cannot tell you that hung from Eli's robe. But I can't tell you that it didn't either, because the Bible says there were pomegranates hanging from Eli's robe, and we're finding within this monumental building, which happens to be the exact dimensions of the tabernacle, and happens to be oriented east-west, and happens to be on a 2-to-1 ratio, and happens to have altar horns and pomegranates and a favissa attached to it. This is what we're finding. So, these could have hung from a cult stand or something like that too, but it's very, very interesting. And so you can see the calyx at the bottom, the bulb at the top. I believe it represents fertility. We went back to the Danish excavations, and we found one that they had misidentified. Last year, October 7th is about to come upon us. Last October 7th, I was in Copenhagen, Denmark with Abigail Levitt, who's our assistant director on our excavation, and we had arranged to go back through, took a long time to do this, but to go back through the Danish collection at the Royal Museum there. And so we were able to identify several things, one of them being a pomegranate that they had misidentified. And then just about 2 or 3 months ago in our summer excavation, we uncovered another miniature pomegranate through wet sifting. In other words, it would have been thrown away if we weren't wet sifting. Now, this all costs money, you understand. We built our own water tower. We've got our own process going on there. And we recycle all the water. And when we're done, the water drains out into the fields and waters the pomegranates. We got a little faience pomegranate. Faience is kind of the forerunner of glass. So now 3 pomegranates from within the Holy of Holies, if you will. Right where the Ark of the Covenant would have sat is right where this tiny pomegranate came from. Now we also have altar horns. Interestingly, we have a demolished altar at Shiloh. This was in a Byzantine structure at Shiloh. You see that horn sticking up? And archaeologist Shimon Gibson had seen this years ago and published this. And so it was on my radar that we may have secondary usage of things from the biblical period. And sure enough, we found this one the next season. I just this week got the residue analysis. Things take forever in Israel. I mean, you have pandemics and wars and all kinds of things going on. I understand that, but it's just the Middle East and things move slowly. But I finally got the residue analysis back from this. In other words, we scientifically want to know, is there residue on here? What substances? Blood, these types of substances. And so we got the residue analysis back this week. It's exciting, but I can't yet tell you what the results were. Stay tuned to Bible and Spade. Here's another one in secondary usage. Here's another one that was burned. Suffice it to say that these things, there was a demolished 4-horned altar associated with this building. Again, suggestive that you had a cultic site. This is a plastered floor, what we would call a sealed locus. Now, why would I care about a sealed locus, a plastered floor? Well, that tells me that everything underneath it is undisturbed from antiquity. So it's plastered, it's sealed, so the pottery sitting on top of that floor, if we're able to date that, which we did, to about the time of David, what we would call the Iron Age 2A, that means that underneath that floor, it should be from the Iron Age 1 Tabernacle period, maybe collared rim jars, very signature of the Tabernacle period. And I told our guys, if we're fortunate and there was a destruction, we archaeologists love destruction, okay? If there's a destruction layer, we'll be able to carbon date it, and I predict the carbon dates will be about 1075 BC. Don't you love it when you're right? So sure enough, we had a destruction layer underneath there. We were able to extract good clean carbon dates, and they dated to about 1060 BC plus or minus 30, so exactly in the window of where I had predicted. And yes, we did also have collared rim jars. Another look at that destruction layer. We are also now finding murex shells within this building. Now, why in the world would I care about a murex shell? Well, number one, we're in the Central Highlands, and the ocean is way down over here, the Mediterranean. So someone brought that for a reason. Plenty of murex shells on the coast. Why would we have one in the Highlands? This is where you get the purple dye for the priestly garments, is from the murex shells. Who lived at Shiloh? The priests. And so what are we now finding? Murex shells. All right, the big word for the day, the V word, is verisimilitude. Verisimilitude. Like if the Bible were a reliable historical source, what types of things would we expect to find? Like altars and bones and buildings and murex shells and pomegranates. We are finding those things. So it's very much in character with what we would expect to find. Here's what the murex shell looks like. It's a little gland within the sandal. It takes a whole lot of these. to make the purple dye for the priestly garments. But very, very interesting. So maybe we have pomegranates hanging from the priestly garments. Maybe we have the shellfish from which the dye is extracted to make those garments. Very interesting how we're able to then put all of this together. We also have storage rooms adjacent to this monumental building. Now, nowhere else on the site do we have this. Only here on the north. It's against the big fortification wall, a series of storage rooms. It looks like this. They cluster together. Now, I wonder, why would we have storage rooms next to this monumental building when we don't have them anywhere else on the site? Let's imagine that you come, Moses has commanded you to tithe. And so you come to Shiloh. Just exactly how are you going to do that? Are you going to go to tabernacle.org and make a secure online donation? Are you going to write a check? Give cash? Coins? None of those things exist. So how will you obey the word of the Lord? You're going to bring commodity, bushels and barrels of commodity you're going to bring with you to Shiloh. And where do they go? Into these storage rooms. Inside these storage rooms, we have dozens of very large storage jars, what we would call pithoi. Some of them as big as I am. And so there's these massive storage jars, and they have a story to tell. And again, we do residue analysis on these. We reconstruct these. We're building a whole pottery lab now at Shiloh. We have so much pottery, thanks to a generous donor. We're building our own pottery lab on site to reconstruct all this pottery so that people, long after we're gone, people will be able to come and to see, Jeremiah 7:12, see what God did at Shiloh. Here's another look at those storage rooms as they emerge. And again, as we continue to go deeper in the site. Here's that collared rim jar that I mentioned earlier, what they look like. It has a type of collar on it. It doesn't evert, the rim doesn't go out, it doesn't evert, it doesn't invert, but it's straight up. If you have collared rim jars, and you have 4-room houses, and you have no pig bones in that stratum, ladies and gentlemen, guess what you have? You have Israelites, okay? These are the telltale ethnic indicators. Now, when I say bones, we have a zoo archaeologist on our staff, and we have tens of thousands of animal bones that we are analyzing. Every bone gets analyzed, every seed, if you can imagine, gets analyzed, every single piece of evidence, so that when we're done, I want to be able to walk away and say, we didn't leave anything left unturned, okay? Every piece of evidence we have examined. Now, within each stratum, we can tell percentages. So, for example, strata 8, strata 7, these are the Canaanite levels, Amorite levels before the Israelites arrive. We have about 4% pig bone. Stratum 6, it all changes. Now we have 0% pig bone. Stratum 5, 0% pig bone. Stratum 4, 0% pig bone. What just happened? I mean, it's not, there has to be an explanation for this. And of course, if you're a Bible reader, you know that there's a prohibition against pork. Now, when I say 0, it's like 0.1 or something like that. There's a stray bone here and there. And you may be wondering, like, where did that come from? Have you ever smelt bacon frying? Okay. Some poor Israelite, it was probably more than he could bear. I don't know. Or a wild boar or something. I don't know. Then, when the Christians are in charge, when the Byzantine period rolls around, for us that would be stratum 2. Now, guess what? We're back to 4% pig bone. So, we have dietary changes. This tells us something. So, collared rim jars, absence of pig bones, 4-room houses, all of this shouts at us that we're looking at Israelite occupation. Now, you say, Israelite occupation, that's really interesting. So you are out to prove that the Israelites have an ancient land claim. I mean, here we are in the west bank of Israel, Judea, Samaria. You're very political then, aren't you? Listen, the last thing we want to be is political. All we're doing is reporting what we find. But does this illustrate who lived there in different time periods? Yes. And we do have Islamic remains. I mean, they're much higher on the tell. We publish those remains as well. But there was very clearly an ancient Jewish presence. Al Jazeera 3 years ago or so published an article where they said the three greatest enemies of Israel were Bibi Netanyahu, Mike Huckabee, and Scott Stripling. I said, what? I'm just an archaeologist. What are you talking about? Like, is there a fatwa or something out? Why would I be considered an enemy of the Palestinian people? If I said enemy of Israel, I meant to say enemy of the Palestinian people. And I am not. I mean, many close Palestinian friends. Many of them are Christians. But from their perspective, what we were excavating was establishing what the Bible said. And if that was the case, then that, I guess, made us an enemy. Okay, quickly, let's look at our favissa. This is area D on the eastern edge of the site. We have a massive bone deposit. So far, we have about 20,000 animal bones, clean bones, only from the biblical sacrificial system, disproportionately, sit forward in the saddle, please, disproportionately from the right side of the animal. As per Leviticus 7, if you will, that the right side of the animal is the priest's portion, and mixed in with all of these bones is pottery from the time of Joshua down to the Tabernacle period. Beautiful bichrome pottery, chalices, goblets, things that are typically what we would consider cultic. Mixed in with this, don't take a picture of this next slide, please, but mixed in with this, we have gold offerings, 7 pieces of gold so far that we have excavated, gold stars, gold pendants, and so forth. You do not lose gold in the ancient world. This is intentionally given. These are tabernacle offerings. And imagine that what's the most valuable thing you had was this gold star or this gold earring or whatever it might be. And when you went to Shiloh, not only did you give this commodity and so forth, maybe you're like Hannah and I will not offer to the Lord that which costs me nothing. And you're going to take something of tremendous value and it's given over to the Lord. And so it goes into this favissa, this deposit. We have a gate area. Here's a couple of our team members analyzing this gate. We have a threshold, stratification within the gate. Socket stones for that gate lying around, lower and upper socket stones, and massive pillars that began to emerge. And again, we've gone through this much material to get down to this level. Lo and behold, the ancient gate of Shiloh survived. The one where Eli died. This is what we think it looked like. Unfortunately, right now, I don't have time to go through this, but Amarna 288, I am suggesting I'm publishing a new groundbreaking peer-reviewed article on this. One of the Amarna tablets, this is Amarna 288, one of the letters from the king of Jerusalem during the period of the conquest, is complaining about the people of Silu, and by my argument and the clue lies in the biblical text to solving this riddle, where I think we prove this. Shiloh is not only mentioned in the Bible, we actually have a mention outside the Bible, and it even mentions the gate and people dying in the gate. And what did we find in the gate this summer? A human skull. Our first human remains at Shiloh. The Bible says Eli died in the gate. The Amarna letters say that Turbasu and Yabdihada died in the gate at Shiloh. And now what do we find in the gate? A human skull currently under analysis. We also have a northern approach road, a series of small finds. Look at that Israelite fingerprint on this bula. These are the type of things you recover from wet sifting. These are scarabs. In another month or so, you'll see a new article by myself and Gary Uri appearing in Judea Samaria Research Studies on 3 Shiloh scarabs.